Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post-ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Wing Commander Liz Fredrickson. This evening we commemorate the 108th anniversary of the start of the Third Battle of Ypres. After mid-1917, following mutinies in the overstrained French army, British forces assumed an even greater role in the war on the Western Front. Attacking from Ypres in Belgium, the British Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, sought to break out of the so-called Ypres salient and reclaim the Belgian coastline from the German army. Following the success at Mézines in June, which removed the Germans from the British southern flanks, the offensive began in earnest on the 31st of July, 1917. Australian forces were brought into the offensive on the 20th of September, where they took part in an attack along Menin Road. Attacking on a narrow front, supported by immense amounts of firepower, the battle was a great success. Further successful advances followed at Polygon Wood on the 26th of September and at Broodsender on the 4th of October. The fighting went on in appalling weather and with crippling losses, the Australians taking part in unsuccessful attacks at Polkapel on the 9th of October and Passchendaele on the 12th of October. In just over a week, there were almost 11,000 Australian casualties. Finally, with the British Army stuck in the low-lying muddy fields, churned up by months of artillery fire, the bloody offensive came to an untidy end in November. Many would afterwards refer to this offensive, actually a series of battles, by the name of the village that had become the last objective, Passchendaele. All 5 Australian divisions took part in the Third Battle of Ypres. In 8 weeks of fighting, they had incurred over 38,000 casualties. No breakthrough was achieved. The costly offensives ended with the capture of Passchendaele village after the Australians had been relieved by the Canadian Corps, widened the Ypres salient by a few kilometres. Official historian Charles Bean later reflected on the carnage, writing, "I've often thought that many a youngster, when he was hit out there on the Passchendaele heights, and he knew that the end had come, must have thought to himself, well, at least they'll remember me in Australia." Today, we remember the Third Battle of Ypres. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, we warmly welcome Mr. Patrick Delgaitis, Deputy President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We also warmly welcome the families of matron Irene Melville Drummond and Sister Kathleen Margaret Noose, who were among 21 Australian nurses massacred by Japanese troops on Banker Island on the 16th of February 1942. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services Clubs League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial, students on behalf of St Andrew's Anglican College visiting from Peregrine Springs, Queensland, and students on behalf of the Exchange Group visiting in conjunction with the Hawkesbury Sister City Association. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students and visitors who are able to do so, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record that they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who've given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Captain Henry Charles Dight Cadel. Henry Cadel was born on the 17th of May 1876 in Gayndah, Queensland. He was one of the 11 children of James John Cadel, a farmer, and his wife Elizabeth. Henry Cadel attended Brisbane Grammar School before moving to Sydney, where he studied engineering at Sydney Technical College. In May 1908, Cadel married Constance Cara Blackett in Ashfield, Sydney. The young couple later moved to Newcastle, where Cadel worked as an electrical engineer. He was also a member of the local militia and rifle club. In May 1914, Cadel's wife gave birth to their first child named Cara Elizabeth. Just 2 months later, the First World War broke out and men from across Australia began volunteering to serve. Henry Cadel enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 7th of March 1916. He was granted a commission on joining the AIF and was assigned to the newly raised 35th Battalion with the rank of lieutenant. After a short period of training, he embarked for active service, sailing from Sydney in May 1916 on board the troop ship Benalla. Lieutenant Cadel arrived in Plymouth, England in July and went into camp to continue training alongside other new recruits. A month later, Cadel was promoted to captain. In November 1916, his battalion moved to France, arriving on the Western Front for a bitterly cold winter in the trenches. In the difficult conditions at the front, Cadel eventually became ill and was sent to hospital with influenza. The 35th Battalion took part in only minor engagements for the first half of 1917. In June, Cadel and his men were soon drawn into the fighting around Messines Ridge, during which period Cadel served with distinction. Afterwards, he and his men spent time defending gains made during the attack. On the 12th of October 1917, Cadel and his comrades returned to the front lines to take part in an attack on the strategically significant village of Passchendaele, 10 kilometres east of Ypres. Located high upon the ridge, their objective was difficult. Despite days of heavy rain, the battle proceeded in the early morning under appalling, muddy conditions. Lance Corporal Murray described the scene. At 5 a.m, our guns opened up with a barrage. When I heard the rattle and roar, I felt like crying. I knew that the boys were going forward in semi-darkness. Scores of our guns were buried in the mud and useless, while it was impossible to get ammunition to others and they could not fire a shot. The guns were too far back and could not get up closer owing to the bad state of the ground. Scores of Fritz's strong points contained machine guns too. During the early hours of the morning, we got into the village and up onto the desired ridge, but were unable to advance and had to retire to within 300 yards of our starting point. All night long, the strafing continued while we lay in shell holes in the slush, mud and rain. Several times I went up to my hips in mud and never in less than to the top of my boots. I'm certain that I was bogged to the hips 50 times at least, and crawling out of that alone knocks it out of a chap. Our stunt was hell while it lasted. By the time the attacking force had withdrawn, Australian units alone had suffered some 38,000 casualties since the offensive began in July. Among the dead was Captain Henry Cadel, who was killed in action at some point during his unit's attack. In the chaos of the battle, he was never seen or heard from again, and his exact fate remains unknown. Cadel was posthumously awarded the Military Cross for his actions at Messines Ridge in July 1917. His final resting place was never located, and he is commemorated on the Meningate Memorial to the missing in Ypres, Belgium. Captain Henry Cadel was 41 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in World War I. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Henry Charles Dight Cadel, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.